Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fretboard Journal podcast. This time around, I'm going to introduce you to our newest employee here at the Seattle Fretboard Journal headquarters, Mike Buchman. Mike is an incredible local musician. He is a frequent at many open mics around town. He's an all-around great human being. If you email us with any questions about the issue you just received or problems with your subscription or whatever, Mike might be the person writing you back. And I wanted to talk to him just to share his story with all of you, just so you know who you're talking to, but also because Mike just retired from his day job and just went and took this incredible guitar making class with acoustic guitar maker Robbie O'Brien in Colorado. Within a week, Mike went and built an acoustic guitar with Robbie's tutelage. He found out about Robbie through the Luthier on Luthier podcast. I just thought the experience of going and building a guitar in such a short period of time with a master luthier was too good of a story to not share with you all. So I just handed him the mic while he was here working. So we're talking to Mike Buchman, Seattle-based musician, Seattle-based, can we call him a guitar maker now? Probably not. It's a great chat. And like I said, if anyone out there hits us up at fretboardjournal@gmail.com or has any issues, Mike is probably the person who will be helping you out while I'm doing some traveling, and it's a great chat. Before we get to my chat with Mike, just want to thank our sponsors, Seattle's own Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar, one of the coolest guitar stores you could ever walk into. Vintage, acoustics, electrics, synths, you name it. Go check them out. Know that they have a great repair shop right next door to their showroom, and tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. We're also brought to you by Peghead Nation, where you can get your first month free or $20 off any annual subscription with the discount code Fretboard. So many former Fretboard Journal guests and subjects have been teaching over there. It's really a beautiful thing. And then Stringjoy Strings is sponsoring the show. Once again, you can get 10% off your first order with the discount code Fretboard when you check out. They've got acoustic and electric guitar strings as well as mandolin and banjo strings now. Very cool. All right, here is my chat with Mike Buchman. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks as always for tuning in. I can't believe we've done 500 of these. It's really a beautiful thing. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here.
So your name is going to be muttered a lot lately because I'm going away for a few weeks and you're helping me out. So let this be an official business announcement. If anyone in the first few weeks of May needs to reach out to the Fretboard Journal, you'll probably be talking to Mike or emailing with Mike.
That's right. Yeah.
But before we get into that, you have been a musician around town for decades. I've known you since the start of the Fretboard Journal. Why don't you explain who you are and kind of your guitar love?
Yeah. I met you when it was the ukulele occasional, I think.
Yeah.
And you were just plotting out the Fretboard Journal. And around that time, I was just starting to learn to play guitar. I'm in my mid-60s. I'm retired, but I've only been playing since my 40s. So I'm kind of a late bloomer on this. And, one of the things that I really love doing is playing in front of people. I'd be loath to say performing because for a long time it was stumbling. It wasn't really performing. But, you do it enough times and you start to get reasonable, and so I'm a performing songwriter, I guess. I don't play big venues, but I like to get out and play and share my music with folks.
Yeah. You do some open mics around town, right?
Yeah, I do open mics. I play gigs at, some small venues around town and, try to get together with other songwriters and sort of share our art together.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
And your songwriting journey, did that involve camps or workshops or just
good question. I've been a writer all my life. I've been a journalist. I've been a wannabe fiction writer. And so writing was always something I did. And part of what I love about music is the lyrics. I remember debates, with friends in junior high about whether Bob Dylan's music was more important as lyrics or as music, So that's something that I've always thought about. And I have not gone to a whole lot of the organized guitar camp kind of stuff. I've pretty much learned on my own. Songwriting, review groups with friends, some other, occasional one-off kinds of things. But most of it's self-taught or self-experienced, I guess.
Yeah. And the songs are primarily just you and an acoustic guitar, right?
Mostly me and acoustic guitar. I had a duo for a while that was really fun, but creative differences, you know.
It happens.
Even
to
every band, right? And now some banjo. You know, I'm learning to play old time banjo, claw hammer, and finger picking. So I've written a couple songs on banjo, and hoping to take the claw hammer into more of an ensemble setting at some point.
That's got to be a completely different, I don't know, accompanying yourself on banjo just seems way harder.
The accompanying yourself on claw hammer is harder for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I finger pick playing guitar, so picking the banjo like that, it's not Scruggs rolls by any stretch. You know, it's more like Travis picking on a banjo. Yeah. That works out okay. And something about the banjo tunings, like I find melodies on the banjo really easily.
I want to talk to you, obviously, about the work I'm going to put you up to here at the Fretboard Journal and the guitar that you just made. But before we get to that, we were just talking. You went to the David Grisman 80th birthday party bash at the Moore Theater here, which is like, for folks who are listening to this outside of Seattle, the Moore is a great theater, but it's not like the theater in Seattle. So this was sort of like an intimate setting, probably the most intimate setting where anyone will ever capture Billy Strings ever at this point.
Right.
I don't know how many people, it's a couple thousand?
Yeah, maybe a couple thousand. Yeah, maybe a little bit less.
But Grisman lives in Port Townsend, Washington. I think the world knows that. And so this was probably the closest theater he could drive to and have all of his like famous friends play at. What was it like?
Yeah, it was honestly one of the peak music experiences of my life, both musically, you know, the kinds of, you know, genius names, you know, Sam Bush and Daryl Anger, Mike Marshall. Billy Strings, you know, it was the unannounced surprise guest and played almost the entire show. So just these, you know, these sort of god figures of acoustic music, of dog music, of bluegrass, all on stage together was a big part of it. But, you know, really palpable in the room was the love that they all felt for David, for Sam and what he's doing to keep the dog music alive, for each other. So it was, you know, it was a gathering of a tribe in a way that was just really amazing. You know, at one point, the entire 2,000 of us broke out singing Happy Birthday to David.
Yeah.
And people just kept coming on and off stage, guest stars. And, you know, every person as they entered and exited gave every other person on stage like a real hug, not just like a fist bump or, you know, that sort of tap your shoulders kind of hug, but like they were embracing each other because people knew how special it was to be together, to have the chance to do this and to celebrate a legend.
Yeah. Danny Barnes was there. Grant Gordy was also there. Two folks who I think folks listening to this podcast probably are well familiar with. Did it feel like it was, did they rehearse it or did this just happen?
They rehearsed. Oh my God. Yeah. So, you know, the setup was that the first set was Sam and some of the quote younger generation, although Ronnie McCrory was included in that band, played older dog music. So that was the primary, the core band there. They introduced it as the Sam Grisman Quintet, you know, an homage to the David Grisman Quintet. And it was Sam on the bass, of course, Billy Strings on guitar, Dominic Leslie on mandolin, Ronnie McCrory on mandolin, and Alex Hargraves on violin. So they played the older material with guest stars coming on and off, including at the end of the set, David, you know, for probably the last 20 minutes or so. They played an hour and a half, and it was just spellbinding. You mentioned, you know, the opportunity to see Billy in a small place, but also to see Billy not in the role of front man and, you know, having to carry sort of the personality of the show. He was so respectful in the way that he approached these other folks and so clear in his affection for the music and for the players that he was with. And, you know, sort of like looking at his shoe tops, you know, like barely engaging the audience in some way. I think I read later, you know, a post he put on social media that he was really moved, you know, moved to tears by some of the experience. And that showed, you know, in the deference. But man, that young man can play guitar. First time I'd seen him live, and it was a real treat. So then the second set, David came out with a core band, And Danny was on that. I'm going to fumble on some of the other folks that were with that ensemble. There's a lot more guest starring going in and out there.
Yeah.
And they play newer material, stuff that David's composed, pretty much pandemic and on. And some of that was some of the most emotional and beautiful music you can imagine, culminating in a 28, 29 person orchestra of all the players that had been on stage, as well as some additional folks. Sharon Gilchrist, for instance, that hadn't been on stage yet, playing a couple of major suites of music that Dog had composed.
Incredible.
Just incredible.
So there's musicians just waiting in the wings for the encore. Everybody wanted to be there.
World-class musicians waiting in wings for the encore. Yeah. And I've had the chance to see Sam play a few times locally at the Tractor, and David has guested on a couple of those shows. And it's been, amazing to see David in a really small venue. But it was even more amazing to see David with a room full of his peers and, the people he has supported in acoustic music for most of his career, people who have, given life to his various bands. It's something I won't forget anytime soon.
It's so cool. Was it recorded?
There are a bunch of videos on YouTube.
I've seen a few of those.
Max, I don't know if I can say this, Max Berde, Berde, has a whole bunch of stuff up there. It was filmed for nugs.net and has not yet been released. The official announcement said some artist clearance issues. So, fingers crossed those will all get worked out and Nugs will eventually release it. I'm sure there must be high quality audio of it, knowing David and his, label. I've seen nothing publicly about whether they plan to release it.
But they had full on cameras.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would think they would have gotten the clearance before, but that's it's rock and roll.
Exactly.
It's bluegrass.
Exactly. And is it like an artist who isn't giving clearance or the artist's lawyers who aren't giving clearance? It's complicated.
I understand.
Yeah.
So you're having quite the retirement. You went to the Grisman. You retired a month ago, 2 months ago?
Almost 2 months ago.
2 months ago.
But who's counting?
You went to the Grisman birthday party, which was amazing. I'm bummed that I couldn't get tickets. And then before that, you built a guitar.
I did.
Okay, I think most Fretboard Journal listeners, readers have daydreamed about building their own guitar or at least shadowing their luthier hero.
Yeah.
What did you do?
So I took a 6-week class with a luthier in Parker, Colorado named Robbie O'Brien. You can catch some of Robbie on Luthier. I think it's episode 14 with Michael Baskin.
Yep.
So Robbie does this one-on-one class, and in 6 days, you start with a pile of boards and a spool of fret wire and some tuners and some pieces of bone. And at the end of 6 days, you have a completely finished guitar, finishing done, strung up in your arms, ready to play. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. It was crazy intense. Folks I know who build guitars, when I told them I was going to build a guitar in 6 days, were like, how the hell are you going to do that?
I was about to ask you that question.
Robbie has worked out this system, and he's been a teacher probably more than he's been a luthier in some ways. He's been building guitars since, I think, the late 80s. But he's been a teacher his whole life, and his passion is really how to communicate complicated things in ways that are easily assimilatable. Now, I didn't, take the class hoping to learn and bring that knowledge back, to my own shop and continue to build guitars. If I had, trying to remember all the details would have just, fried my wires completely. But as an experience of just hands-on building a guitar, it was amazing because he had everything dialed in and had all the processes dialed in. So we had very little downtime. We'd finish gluing the two pieces of the back together and pivot over and start working on something else. Everything was scripted, and he knew within 15 minutes of any time in the day whether we were on our marks or not.
So 6 days. Let's just go through this whole process. How long are these days?
The first 3 days are 9-hour days with a lunch break, maybe a 45-minute lunch break. So essentially 8-hour work days. And in those days, we, thicknessed the wood, assembled the top, ripped the braces, sanded everything to the right radiuses, built the rims, built the box, roughed out the neck, did the fretboard. Actually, I guess we cut the neck by the end of the third day. The neck was shaped. So literally at the end of the third day, we had a guitar in the raw that had yet to be finished. And we spent the last 3 days, 4-hour days, doing a French polish finish that, started with epoxy pore filler on the rosewood. It was East Indian rosewood back and sides, Sitka top. It's an OM. So really just did finish work, and then, like making the bridge and nut and saddle and, that kind of stuff. The last couple of days. And the final day is just installing the nut and saddle, reaming out the bridge pins, putting on the tuners, doing a setup and playing,
So I want to go back a little bit. And I should add, you are writing a story about this for a future issue of the magazine, and we'll have beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
I just, while it was fresh in your mind, wanted to have you recount some of this. How much customization, variability? What does he ask you about what you want to build?
Yeah, that's a great question. He basically builds a couple specific models for most of his students. He takes 20, 25 people through this every year. So almost every other week of the year, he's doing this one-on-one build with a student.
So wild.
And part of the way you do it in 6 days is that there isn't a lot of customization, right?
Sure.
So he builds an OM. I think I might have had some choice in the back and side wood, but I wanted rosewood. My other guitar is a mahogany guitar. And he builds a classical guitar. So when I originally approached him, I wanted to build a 00, and he was like, yeah, that's probably not a great fit for me. I've since, learned from conversation with him that if you've worked with him in the past and you go back and do it again, and he has better sense of your skills, or if you're somebody that's come in, as some of his students have, with a couple hundred guitars under their belt already, then he can customize. He'll build a cutaway or a bevel or do a different size. And some people do bring, purchase their own wood. The fellow after me had this Sedacoa that was just gorgeous, but he brought that in, and they did build a cutaway. I think Robbie, tells people it's going to take an extra day if we're going to do some of those kinds of customizations. And even like bring an extra set of sides if we're doing, a cutaway in case we break it. Yeah. So, the only customizations I really did was I did put a pickup in it because I'm going to be playing it out.
Yeah.
And I put in some abalone dots on the peg head that, if I wanted to bring a pre-installed inlay on a plate of wood to do the peg head overlay, that would have been cool. I knew just drilling some dot holes, the same way as we would drill the fretboard dots, wouldn't be a huge addition. So I cleared that ahead of time with him, and we did a little design with some abalone dots.
Had you built anything before this?
I'd built a lap dulcimer, Appalachian dulcimer, when I was in high school.
I've got a dulcimer podcast in the works.
Yeah. And it was from a kit, Black Mountain Dulcimer Company. They're still out there. I don't know if they still have kits. The clamps were masking tape, pulled tight over the edges, pre-bent sides, pre-cut. So it was mostly a gluing and sanding project.
Yeah.
And then when I started playing guitar, I learned about cigar box guitars, and I built a couple cigar box guitars at home.
Remember that? We talked about that years ago.
Yeah, I was going to do an article on a builder that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
But, so there was a little sense of like carving necks,
Yeah.
and putting in. I didn't do frets; they were fretless. They were just wood burned lines, for fret markers. So, like, have I built an instrument? Kind of, but no, not really, not a real instrument. Yeah.
I'm just thinking like Robbie's got this operation that, in 6 days you're going to go home with a finished guitar. You don't have to wait for the finish to cure anything. It's French pot. Like he's got it down to a science, but I also know how guitar people are. So does he give you some ground rules at the beginning of like, don't interrupt me with questions about should I put the Ivoroid or, should I buy ebony bridge pins or whatever? Every guitarist is questioning all the time.
Yeah. He didn't, now maybe because I had emailed some of my questions ahead of time, and I kind of realized like, to do this, once I signed up for it, I started following him on social media. So I was, he posts pictures of the builds and I had a pretty clear sense. He does have the entire 6-day process available as a series of online videos. You can buy his videos.
Okay.
I didn't buy them, but I looked through like the table of contents of each. So I had a pretty good sense of the flow. And, he's a very low key dude. He's not hard ass in terms of, how he directed me. If I was holding a tool the wrong way, he'd give me a clear, reminder about how to hold it the right way. The file should be level, not down, so we're not dipping, whatever. But no, he likes to talk, and we had a lot of interesting conversation, both about the build itself and, about everything else in life. More of that was at lunchtime, but he's a very chill dude. And I think, he takes his pedagogy seriously, his theory of teaching. And part of that, as he expressed to me, is making sure you can have a good relationship with the student. And that, if a student enjoys your company, they're going to do a better job listening to you and they're going to make a better guitar. So I think he works hard to try to get a sense of who his student is and, adapt as as a good teacher does to the student. So we didn't have too much of that, not too much interruption.
How much was there like a wait list to get in on this program? Or how much time was there between, hey, I think I want to build a guitar, I'm going to inquire with Robbie, versus you're in Parker, Colorado?
I signed up 18 or 20 months ahead of when I went. Now I probably could have signed up a little bit earlier, but I was timing it to be right after my retirement, et cetera. So I think his list is pretty much full for 24 or 25. I mean, 25. And it's probably filling up, for 26. So he doesn't keep a wait list. You basically put down your deposit and you've got your date. So very occasionally somebody will cancel and he can sneak somebody in, on shorter term notice.
It's like an Airbnb, but you build a guitar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Forgive me, Coloradans. What is Parker, Colorado even like? I don't even know. I can't visualize it.
Yeah, Parker, Colorado is, it's an exurb of Denver. It's a blossoming bedroom community. There wasn't a whole lot of there,
Do you stay on site?
You don't.
Okay.
I stayed in an Airbnb, which evidently is illegal in that county to have short-term rental Airbnb. So I won't reveal the name of the Airbnb.
Yeah.
But I had a lovely place that had donkeys in there. It was like a little ranch and donkeys.
Now people
in the
be able
yard.
to find it.
Yeah, it was really sweet, and it was 2.5 miles from Robbie's house. So everything's right there. Like it's an easy place to stay. There's not a ton of distraction, in Parker to pull you out to do something else. And it's 20 miles away from Denver, so I was able to go into the city on a couple of the short days, and enjoy Denver.
Are you just mentally and physically exhausted at the end of each day?
The first couple of days, yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to stay in an Airbnb is because I like to cook. So, I had shopped and I had plans for dinners, and I came home after the first couple of days and just sat and watched something idiotic on Netflix and ate chips because that was literally all the energy I had for the first hour or two. So, eventually I would kind of regain my strength on the basis of, corn chips. But it was exhausting. It was mentally exhausting. It was physically exhausting. You don't think of sanding as like a workout, but one of the things that we did, Robbie's has a lot of like phrases, catchphrases, and Some of them are his, some of them I think he got from other luthiers. But when you're radiusing the rims, you have this big dish. It's maybe 2.5, 3 feet across, and it's, cut into the radius and has a coating of sandpaper on it. And so you're sanding by sort of rotating the rims on front and back on these two different dishes, 30 feet on one, and I think the other's 12 or 15. And he calls it driving the bus. And because you're steering.
Yeah, it's like a giant steering wheel.
And you're basically doing that for a half hour, and it's exhausting. I'm like, my arm muscles are aching. Didn't think of it as a physical task, going into it. But yeah, it was pretty exhausting work.
Does Robbie believe in using CNCs and automation, or is this a purely handmade guitar?
It is. He uses, tools for sure. Yeah. He uses sanders, thicknessing sander. We used a disc sander. We used drill press, table saws of, electric saw to fret. He has a CNC machine. It's not set up yet. And, he thinks of it more as something to build jigs. He's big on jigs. Mm-hmm. The cutting the neck joint, he had a jig for both sides of that and a router ready to go. One of the ways he keeps things moving in terms of the pace is he doesn't have one router that he changes bits and recalibrates for different tasks. He has 3 or 4 routers all set up with the right bit and the right measurements, calibrated, ready to go. So when he needs the router to cut the neck joint, he just goes to the drawer and picks it up, and there it is. So he's got jigs that he's purchased, from LMI and from StewMac, and he's got jigs that he's made himself for his processes. Some of them are very high tech. Some of them are like just a piece of plywood that's cut into the shape of the headstock, with the spots for the tuners, marked in, and that's kind of nicked up and beaten up because it's been used, 100 sometimes.
Yeah. Are there choices along the way? You mentioned like some people who've got more experience under their belt can go cut away, or there's, you can bring your own wood if you got backups. Are there at any point choices along the way of like, if you want a boomy guitar, do this. If you want this to be more of a singer-songwriter guitar.
Yeah, that's a great question. The end of the first day, I had some homework, and that was to describe to Robbie what I think a good guitar sounds like.
Oh, what'd you say? Or is this in the article?
That's in the article. Okay, we shouldn't give it all away.
All right.
That's in the article. So, he knew that I was primarily a finger picker and a singer-songwriter, not like a heavy strumming, or not a bluegrass player with a thick pick. So he has some frequency goals for testing, for frequency testing, that have been developed with another one of his mentors, Trevor Gore, luthier in Australia. And so, if I had wanted OM, this was an OM that I was going to be heavily strumming, it would have been one set of numbers. And because I was primarily finger picking, it was another set of numbers. So we knew, and the testing is you're basically tapping the box at various stages in the build, from before bindings are on all the way through when the bridge is on and the finish is on, and measuring the resonant frequencies of the top, the back, and the whole box. And so there's these 3 numbers, and there are a couple different ways to do that targeting. And we narrowed down where we were going on this particular guitar and got very close. Obviously, the frequency of the top is the most important in terms of the sound generation. And I think we came within a hair of right on the nose on one of the sets of frequencies. So it's hard to be objective.
Yeah.
It's a pretty damn good sounding guitar to me. And it's, it's a brand new guitar. So of course it will open up and change with playing. And
But I can see why you said some people enroll in this who have built a bunch of guitars. That sort of theory, science, like I don't think you could. I mean, maybe you can teach yourself that at home. You can teach anything at home, but I'd imagine that's why some of these like luthiers with guitars under their belts would want to take this class.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of it. I think part of it is to learn how to build efficiently.
Yeah.
To learn some of the techniques he uses. The French polish in particular, I think he's done French polish classes that are just focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you've been trying to figure out whether you're going to put up a spray booth and deal with toxic sprays or whether you want to learn how to do a French polish that, you need a rubber glove on, but that's just so your skin doesn't look brown. Like it's food grade stuff you're putting on your guitar, right? So I think there's some specific skills that people want to pick up around how to arrange their shop, how to build fast, how to and some of the numbers. I didn't track the angle of the neck, the neck relief, but he can tell you exactly what angle he uses and why. And
the bolt-on neck.
Yeah, it's a mortise and tenon bolt-on neck. And man, it's a rock solid joint. You look at the side of the guitar and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, there's a level of detail and complexity that I wasn't trying to pick up because I knew I wasn't going to ever use it again. That if you're going to use it, you'd probably be focused and dialed in a little bit more on some of that stuff in the day to day with him.
You just ruined my follow-up question, which is, are you going to build more guitars? And you're like, no, I was one and done.
Yeah, no. I live in a small Ballard bungalow in Seattle. I have a tenant in my basement, so I don't have room for a shop. When I was building even the minor builds of a cigar box guitar, I was, pulling a work stand out of my shed and setting it up and pulling out my, I spend more time setting up and tearing down than actually working on the damn thing. So no, I'm not going to continue building. This was really, for me, a one-time experience, and now it's the experience of playing a guitar that I built. But it was also for me a closing of the loop, and I get into this a teeny bit in the article. But I had an interest in being a luthier when I was a kid. After I built that dulcimer kit in high school, I had a brief, set of months where I was sure that was what I wanted to. Never mind, I didn't play guitar at the time. I just wanted to build them, and that didn't happen back then. So this kind of scratched that itch for me in a really fundamental way that feels really good.
Yeah. And because I know somebody out there is probably wondering, what does this ultimate souvenir from Parker, Colorado roughly cost a participant? Like, how much are you in for to do this class?
I think with the material fees and the instruction, with Robbie, it's in between $5,000 and $6,000, probably closer to $6,000. Yeah.
And then you got to find a place to stay in Parker.
You got to find a place to stay in Parker. Yeah. And I think I had an Airbnb that maybe cost me $100 a night.
Yeah.
So it's not cheap. It's, somewhat comparable to deciding you want to go out and buy a really fine guitar. Like, right, you could buy a fine guitar for $6,000-$7,000, no problem, right? You buy a nice Collings or, a hand-built guitar.
But what a fun experience.
It was an amazing experience.
And it's sort of like, if it took him 2 weeks to show you how to build a guitar, you wouldn't scoff as much at the price.
Yeah,
the fact that he's condensed it somehow in the 6 days makes it seem a little more expensive, but he's just efficient, it sounds like.
He's crazy effing efficient. Yeah. Yeah, he's got it down. When he first did this solo one-on-one thing, it was 10 days.
Yeah.
And he figured out a way to collapse it. And, if it wasn't for the desire to let the bridge glue cure for a complete 24 hours before you string the darn thing up, he'd probably do it in 5 days, because the last 3 days are short. It does allow some time that if we weren't, keeping up with schedule, we would have been able to make day, 4 and 5 longer if we needed to catch up on something. Yeah.
You mentioned that you knew of the next student that they use Koa. Is there some sort of like community that you get invited into, or just the Instagram feed where you get to see what other students are up to?
Yeah, he has a group chat
He does.
set up, and I haven't gotten on it yet. I need to remind him to get on that. So I think he told me there's 1,500 people or so
That's crazy.
on that. Many of whom, are students like me who have done this one-on-one class. But prior to doing this, he had a luthier program at Red Rocks Community College outside of Denver. And they would take 100 students a semester through a luthier class. I don't think that program is still existent, or certainly not as robust as when he was running it. So he's, and then of course he has, professional luthier friends all around the world who have participated in some of his educational programs, networked with him. He flies to various places and does classes, in partnership with other folks. So he's got a pretty, wide net of connectedness in the luthier world. Both, folks like me who are completely amateurs, but super interested, and folks who are, have been making this their profession for quite some time.
How close do you feel with your newfound guitar skills? If you needed to adjust the neck or a crack opened up, would you feel confident now doing this yourself?
If I had a shop, yes.
Okay.
Right. Because I don't have a shop and I don't have much tooling. I don't know that I would adjust the neck angle. I don't know if I'd want to deal with that. But if there was a crack, yeah. If I have a finish problem, just like getting some shellac, like I'd have no problem, touching up the finish. Yeah.
All right. I bet there's a bunch of people out there listening who'd be like, I'd adjust the neck, but I would never try to fix a crack. It's funny how everybody's different.
Yeah. Well, and of course, adjusting the neck's pretty fundamental to the sound and the playability. Fixing a crack, like, you screw it up, what the hell. And it has, its screw up marks are visible on the guitar too.
Yeah.
So
are there any that are just glaring where you're like, I remember that?
Yeah. There's one little rasp mark on the bottom side of the neck heel, on the side that faces the ground, that is really clear. And it's, it's a nice little reminder that this was not the work of a master. This was the work of a grasshopper.
No, it's what's this Japanese saying when you purposefully include a mistake on the guitar to show that it's handmade?
Yeah. Or Persian. I've heard that in terms of Persian rugs.
Yeah, that's all you were doing.
Yeah,
that was all intentional.
Yeah, it is definitely handmade.
That's so awesome. I don't know. This is not the cheapest thing to sign up for, but for a lot of folks out there who think they're going to get into lutherie or daydream about going to Roberta Venn or something, like in 6 days, you'd figure out whether or not you wanted to actually build guitars for a living, I would imagine. And you wouldn't have to buy any tools. You'd know by the end of the week.
Yeah, you're going to either like hate it or love it. You're going to get that feel of like, what is it like using a tiny plane on the braces? Like, is that a thrill, or is that just like you're so nervous that you don't want to think about it? What is it like to do the kind of handwork that it takes to carve a neck, using a spoke shave, using a drag and tail rasp, you get a good feel for it. You definitely get a good feel, and you get a great feel for all of the little details that if you're going to do this for real, like go into it, either as an avocation or a vocation, you're going to get exposed to like all the little decisions and nuances that you're going to have to be on top of to do it well.
Yeah. I bet when you walk into a guitar store now, you have a whole new viewpoint on what you tune into.
Yeah, for sure.
So cool. So you said 3 different styles or 2 different styles?
OM and classical guitar are the primary things that he does. I should mention, and didn't get into this in the article, maybe this would be a future article if you're interested, but there's other folks that do this. There's other luthiers that do an immersive one-on-one or very small class experience. There's a couple schools that do things. And, if you Google around, you'll find them pretty easily. There's probably at least a half a dozen, if not a dozen other places around the country. Before I signed up with Robbie, I poked around and looked to see who else, was doing this kind of thing. And So there's other folks, other ways, other time frames to have a somewhat similar experience and come out, with a guitar that you can basically say you built.
I think we had John Thomas wrote about learning from Jay Lichty, I believe. That's one of the teachers.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what made you decide to go with Robbie?
A couple of the other folks I was interested in didn't want to extend their list yet. This was almost 2 years before I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And a couple of them, one of them was not doing it anymore because he had some health things going on, and he recommended working with Robbie.
Yeah.
Robbie was ultimately willing to put me on his list, in the time frame I wanted. And following him on social media and seeing the results was reassuring, to see what people came out with. So it just ended up being a good fit.
Yeah. Well, I saw the guitar when you brought it in last week. It looks amazing. So congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. Sounds pretty good too. I've played one show with it so far. Now, granted, nobody's going to come up to me afterwards and tell me that the guitar I just built sounds like shit. But, for the most part, the people whose ears I trust said it came across really well in the room.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Does this mean you're going to get rid of one of your factory-made guitars? Or
Yeah, you and my wife asking that question. I only have two. I've got a lovely Martin 000 and a Rain Song Parlor guitar, and neither of them are going anywhere anytime soon.
All right. Yeah, I love it. You got the triumvirate now.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Mike, I can't thank you enough for sharing that story and for the forthcoming help here at the magazine. So as I alluded to, I'm going to be taking a few weeks off, and you're going to be manning the fort here. So everybody, please be nice to Mike. Our 56th issue is going to be mailing to everybody from our printer. Mike won't be having to run the tape gun for that. But if there are any issues and you hit the contact us form on the website, Mike's probably going to be answering that.
I'll be the person. Yeah. Looking forward to interacting with Fretboard Journal readers. And, it's going to be a real kick for me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. You're living the guitar fantasy camp
exactly.
right now. You built the guitar. You were 100 yards from Billy Strings, and now you get to man a guitar magazine.
And write about guitars. So, I'm looking forward to, hopefully a long relationship and opportunity to share some stories with folks in the magazine and to make sure people's mail is getting to them on time.
Yeah. Maybe some Facebook and Instagram posts.
Maybe,
and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll just take over the YouTube account. It'll just be a whole bunch of rants.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows what's possible? Yeah, exactly. So if everything is haywire, when Jason is not around, you'll know who to blame.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate all your help. I appreciate you telling us about the guitar too. That was super cool.
Yeah, my pleasure. Real honor to be able to participate in this great magazine and to share a story that's near and dear to my heart.
All right, that was my chat with Mike Buchman. I hope you enjoyed it. Please keep the feedback coming. Leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, and thanks as always for tuning in.